There is a secret the king doesn't know. The most powerful man in the empire, the man who controls the fate of millions, doesn't know that the woman sitting beside him is about to walk into that throne room uninvited. And in this kingdom, that means death, unless the king raises his scepter. This is the story of Queen Esther, a Jewish orphan girl who became a queen and who stood between her people and total destruction. And the hidden part of this story, the part most people miss, might be the most important message in the entire book. To understand Esther's story, we need to travel to the Persian Empire, one of the most powerful empires in world history. The year is approximately 480 BC. The Persian king is Ahasuerus, also known as Xerxes, and he rules over 127 provinces from India to Ethiopia. His palace is in the city of Susa, and it is in Susa where this story begins. King Xerxes throws a grand banquet, a feast that lasts 180 days. He wants to show off his wealth, his power, his glory. On the final day, drunk with wine, he sends for his queen, Vashti, to come before the guests so they can admire her beauty. Vashti refuses. The king is furious. His advisors warn him, if Queen Vashti gets away with this, women all across the empire will start disobeying their husbands. So Vashti is deposed. She was removed as queen, and a search begins for a new queen. In Susa, there was a Jewish man named Mordecai, a descendant of the tribe of Benjamin, whose ancestors had been taken into exile from Jerusalem years before. Mordecai had raised his cousin, a young woman whose Hebrew name was Hadassah, but who was also known by her Persian name, Esther. Esther had no mother or father. Mordecai had taken her in as his own daughter. When the royal search for a new queen began, Esther was brought to the palace. Mordecai gave her one instruction: tell no one you are Jewish. In the palace, Esther went through 12 months of preparation. And when she appeared before King Xerxes, something happened. The king loved Esther more than any other woman. She won his grace and favor above all others. He placed the royal crown on her head and made her queen in the place of Vashti. But Esther kept her secret. She did not reveal her people, her family, or her faith, just as Mordecai had instructed. Now, at this point in the story, a man rises to power in Persia named Haman. King Xerxes honored Haman above all the other nobles. Everyone at the city gate bowed down to Haman. Everyone except Mordecai. Mordecai refused to bow. When the other officials asked him why, Mordecai told them he was Jewish. Haman found out, and he was filled with rage, not just against Mordecai, against all Jewish people everywhere. He went to King Xerxes with a proposal. He said, "There is a certain people scattered throughout your kingdom whose customs are different from all other people. They do not obey the king's laws. It is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them." Haman offered to pay a massive sum of money into the royal treasury in exchange for a decree to destroy all the Jewish people in the Persian Empire. King Xerxes, without even asking who these people were, handed Haman his signet ring. "The money is yours. Do with these people as you see fit." An edict went out to every province. On the 13th day of the 12th month, all Jewish people, men, women, and children, were to be destroyed, killed, annihilated. Haman sat down to drink. The city of Susa was in confusion. And in the palace, the queen didn't know. When Mordecai heard about the decree, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the city, crying loudly and bitterly. News reached Esther. She was in distress. She sent a servant to find out what was wrong. Mordecai sent back a message. He told her everything: the edict, the decree, the plot to destroy their people. He gave the servant a copy of the written edict so she could see it herself, and then he asked her to go to the king, to beg for mercy, to plead for her people. And here is where Esther faces the hardest moment of her life. She sent a message back to Mordecai. Everyone knows that anyone who approaches the king uninvited, even the queen, is put to death, unless the king extends his golden scepter. That is the law, and I have not been called to see the king for 30 days. In other words, I could die just for trying. And Mordecai sent back this reply. These are some of the most famous words in all of Scripture. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. And who knows? Perhaps you were born for such a time as this. Perhaps you were born for such a time as this. Esther received the message, and then she made a decision. She sent word back to Mordecai. Go, gather all the Jews in Susa, and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will fast as well. And then I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. If I perish, I perish. On the 3rd day, Esther put on her royal robes. She stood in the inner court of the palace, facing the king's hall. The king was sitting on his royal throne. She waited. She had no guarantee, no promise, nothing but faith. And then King Xerxes looked up. He saw Esther standing in the court, and he was pleased with her. He extended the golden scepter. Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. She was safe, and what followed was a masterful strategy. Esther did not immediately blurt out her request. She invited the king to a banquet, then another banquet, building the moment, until finally, at the 2nd banquet, the king asked, "What is your petition, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted." And Esther answered, "If I have found favor with you, O king, grant me my life, and grant the lives of my people. For my people and I have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated." The king's face went cold. "Who has done this? Where is the man who has dared to do such a thing?" Esther said. "The adversary and enemy is this vile Haman." The king stood up in rage and walked into the garden. Haman threw himself on the couch where Esther was reclining, begging for mercy. When the king returned and saw Haman, he ordered him seized immediately. One of the king's servants told him, "There is a 75-foot pole Haman had set up to hang Mordecai on." "Hang him on it," the king ordered. Haman was executed on the very pole he had built for Mordecai. The king gave Haman's estate to Esther. He gave Mordecai his signet ring. And a new decree went out, allowing the Jewish people to defend themselves against anyone who attacked them. On the 13th day of the 12th month, the very day Haman had chosen to destroy the Jewish people, they defended themselves and won, and the Feast of Purim was established. A celebration still observed by Jewish people around the world today to remember the day they were saved. So what does Esther's story mean for us? First, God doesn't always make his presence obvious. The book of Esther is the only book in the Bible where the name of God is never explicitly mentioned. And yet, his fingerprints are on every page. God works behind the scenes, even when we can't see him. Second, your position is not for you alone. Esther could have stayed quiet and hoped for the best. But Mordecai's words still ring across thousands of years. Perhaps you were born for such a time as this. The gifts, the access, the opportunities God gives you, they are not just for your comfort, they are for a purpose. Third, courage requires preparation. Esther didn't rush into the throne room. She fasted, she prayed, she planned. Real courage is not the absence of fear. It is moving forward in faith despite fear. And finally, God can use anyone, even those with no power, no status, and no visible protection, to change the course of history. You may feel like an orphan in a foreign land. You may feel like you have no voice. no influence, no way to make a difference. But God sees you where you are, and He may be preparing you for a moment that only you can step into. Thank you for joining us for the story of Queen Esther. If this story stirred something in you, hit the like button and subscribe to MOE Golden Hour Tales TV so you never miss a story. On Friday, we're talking about one of the most misunderstood women in the entire Bible, Mary Magdalene. The truth about who she really was might surprise you. Leave a comment. Is there an area of your life right now where God might be saying, perhaps you were born for such a time as this? God bless you. We'll see you Friday.